Thank you, Steve. Charlie, welcome back.
Can you hear me?
Got you, buddy. So
what do you think of the?
Okay.
Can you see me? Because I can't. Am I in this thing?
You're in it. All you have to do is click start
I just
video.
I just enabled your video. Yeah, there you go. So you can switch it on now.
All right. Let me. Oh God. Let me turn on the light. I'm in my apartment in the city, so.
All right.
Exactly. As conducive as my other one.
Well, at least you're in the city and getting around, Charlie.
Yeah.
Huh? So
yeah, I know, definitely getting around. Hang on 1 second.
Yeah,
turn on one more light.
Okay. You have a flashlight and a candle?
See if I can roll up this shade.
There.
Is that better?
Yeah. Good, buddy.
All right.
All right. So do you have any reaction to the NFP, to the number that we just had?
Pretty I mean, every time I think there's going to be inflation, we get a reading like this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of want, this is just me. I kind of want some high inflation numbers, so the markets impose some discipline on this administration, which wants to keep spending and spending and spending. I think that's the only way to stop them from literally spending another $5 trillion or $10 trillion is to literally get a spike in the long bond above 3%. By the way, I didn't come up with that. Jamie Dimon has mentioned that as a potential. People are talking about that. So when I see
Janet Yellen whispered it, you wrote about it. I mean,
yes.
And then retracted and did a 360. Was she? I mean, I read what you thought that, maybe it's just a misstep, but she's a pretty smart woman. Do you think that she was out there just trying to prepare the ground for what the Fed is going to have to do? Because she knows it, even though, she doesn't come out and say it. That I mean, all you have to do is look at the price of commodities and gold and what's happening everywhere, lumber. I was I was on the CME floor, and I've looked at all these prices, Charlie, including meat prices, live cattle and hogs, and it's gonna be expensive to have a barbecue this summer.
And I love ribs.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this: how do you justify the commodities trading like there's going to be inflation with the number that just came
out? Because of dollar weakness. So you get a weaker dollar in nominal terms. It takes more dollars to buy something, normally drives up prices, nominal price increases. In fact, well,
so let me ask you this, Dale, you're better than this than I am. Where's the inflation? If you have these type of prints on unemployment and stuff like that.
The inflation is on the fiscal and monetary side, that there's no, this makes the Fed look right, that, weak number is bullish because they have to stay loose, and a strong number is good because we're having a recovery. But, the inflation is a lot of it's supply chain.
Yeah, I've heard that. I get a lot
of it's currency. I mean, we had the dollar index at 100. Now it's trading 10% lower. I mean, it doesn't justify 1900 lumber, but a lot of it is supply chain, I think, and the weak dollar. And I'm not a believer that it's a secular story. It's a cyclical story. What's happening here? I still think that we're going to have one more whoosh once risk assets cave, and I think that's a possibility that we're putting in a pretty important top here in the next 30 days or so. And I think that Janet Yellen sees it too. I mean, how can you not look at the price of anything? Copper, Charlie. I remember when I was a commodity broker in Chicago, a bull move in copper would be to 90 cents from 50. Okay, so and on the board of trade, Charlie, they were, there was a chant of beans in the teens because they'd always rally to 10, 12 bucks a bushel, and the floor traders wanted to see them in the teens. Well, the teens are normal now. We're looking at possibility of them being in the 20s, and maybe $30 grains. And that, there are certain things that the Fed can't control. They can't print lumber and they can't print corn. So that's where the inflation is.
Yeah, interesting. Well, that's kind of jives with the information I'm getting.
Okay. Yeah, but I still think
I got a ton of emails on the Janet Yellen story from just small business people that were telling me about supply chain and where they're seeing inflation. It's exactly what you were saying.
Okay. All right. So, that the lumber started during COVID when they were shutting down mills.
Yeah.
And, you shut down things, you shut down mines to reopen mines. It's like capping a well. If you cap an oil well, you can't just go back and turn it on. It takes time. So that's part of it. But I think, you and I have talked that the sacrificial lamb is going to be the dollar, because then it could make, a stagflation or, a depression look more invisible because prices are still going up. And the dollar's under pressure.
It's funny you mentioned stagflation. I was, we got a lot of young kids working at Fox, and I was actually explaining what stagflation was like in the 70s. Yeah. They had, obviously these kids were born in the 90s. Right. So they had no idea that there was something called stagflation. We had massive inflation and I remember my old man couldn't get a job. I mean, there was New York City. Compounding the problem in New York City was the financial crisis in New York City at the time, where all buildings stopped. My dad was a construction worker, so he got a job at a bar. He worked as a bartender, and I remember pumping gas back then, where the lines were around the block. I mean, it's
that's a great segue to something I want to discuss with you, because I'm kind of aggravated about hearing this already about all these government support programs by both former President Trump and current President Biden, that they both say, and they both justify all of this support, and this is Republican and Democrat, that we are doing this because it was through no fault of anybody that this pandemic happened. Well, you know what? When your dad was laid off in the 70s, it was no fault of his own. Right. Yeah. So why is it now a justification for what we're doing with both parties that, wasn't anyone's fault that there was a pandemic? Well, you know what? People have gone through economic hardship through no fault of their own throughout our history and prehistory. So why now are both Republicans and Democrats justifying things like millionaires getting PPE because they have they have employees. So, I was always taught that you save for a rainy day because it rains. And now a couple of states are ending the federal unemployment benefits because they have worker shortage. So, I just don't understand this justification. It was never my fault. Well, yeah, it probably was a few times when I lost a job, but for millions of people all these years, it sticks in my craw that the justification is because it was a pandemic and it wasn't anybody's fault.
Well, listen,
through economic hardship.
You can say the 70s were the fault of the Fed or, fiscal policy, monetary policy, and then an Arab oil embargo, which was a price shock, which helped the push along the stagflation. But those are sort of extraneous, one step removed, arm's length transactions. Well, the problem with this thing, it was literally mandated by the government that we shut everything down. Okay. And it was like government fiat. We're stopping. Right. We're stopping.
Good point.
And some states did better than others. Florida, for example, said enough's enough in May of last year. Right. New York didn't. New York is just only now coming around. And I think that justified some of the spending. Now, did the Trump administration do a great job with the PPE and all that? Of course not. I mean, I know people that had no impact from COVID, in the sense that they had they had a company. It was in
Right.
public relations. It was legal. These were financial advisors who everybody was working from home, dealing
Right.
with clients and making money.
Right.
They got
And they,
PPE loans.
yeah,
Okay. I know.
that's aggravating.
I know a restaurateur in New York that could have used 3 PPE loans because he was hurting so bad. They shut down his business, and he only slowly but surely had to build stuff out, like build an outdoor thing because they wouldn't let indoor dining. They allowed 25% indoor dining, and then they cut that down. I mean, it was a crap show. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
But, that's more incompetence. I think what we're at now, and I listen, I'm not. I've been very critical of the Trump administration spending and all, and a lot more. This is going beyond that. What we have now, in the face, even with today's print, of a decent economic recovery. And if you notice, stocks, the futures haven't moved. They're up because people think the Fed's going to keep printing money.
Right.
I think what you have now is, in the face of an economic recovery, this sort of weird justification to spend $5 trillion. That it's just now it's like I'm not saying Trump was any better, but the justification now is much more incredulous, so to speak.
Okay. All right. So I also wanted to talk about we're capitalists, and dog eat dog, and survival of the fittest, and another situation that I think is really unjustified is take the airlines. All right. So after the tax cut, all that money that they saved in taxes went into financial engineering and stock buybacks. Okay. And so they didn't have any reserves. Why didn't we just let them go down, Charlie? I mean, airlines have gone bankrupt throughout my lifetime. Where's Continental Air? I mean, why didn't we let them go down? And why didn't they use some of that their funds, instead of financial engineering? So, compensation for CEOs and executives is based upon the stock price. And then they weren't hurting. Why did we bail out the airlines? Was it like bailing out the auto companies in 2008?
Why do we bail out the banks? Let's be clear here. When the airline is from what little I know about the airline business, it's not an easy business. It's got very tight margins. It's heavily regulated. So yes, they did stock buybacks, but I'm pretty sure they also compensated their people along the way, and expanded employment. But again, through government fiat, you would have had a whole industry put out of business literally overnight because the government said we're shutting everything down. That to me seems like it's that they and by the way, if all the airlines went out of business, what would that mean?
That would affect business for transport, and
it would just be a horrible situation. So I think that was
it'd be harder to flee the country.
Yes, right.
All right.
I wasn't sure if you were kidding or not, but you see what I'm saying. The government literally would have destroyed the business. Now, I think you're on stronger grounds on the automobile industry and the banks. The banks created the problem themselves, so to speak. Right. You could say the Fed, because easy money spurred their risk taking, but it was their risk controls that weren't up to par, and thus they took enormous risk and they blew themselves up. So do they deserve a bailout? The automobile industry, kind of the same thing. They were facing a recession on top of the fact that they cut all these deals with unions that made their balance sheet untenable when they hit a massive downturn. Again, do they deserve bailouts? And I think that's different than saying, okay, the government is shutting everything down, and we have a chance, and there's a good chance the airline industry might go at least into a Chapter 11 restructuring, unless we give them money. I still can't believe they shut everything down. To me, after the first month, when you know that your hospital system, and we're not India here, thank God. I mean, we're an advanced economy and country. In a month after you saw in New York that you can handle the situation, you have barges, there was a way to manage the what was going on in the hospitals. And I know a lot about what was going on in the hospitals because my brother was on ground zero. He runs the ICU at Brooklyn Hospital, which is ground zero because it's an inner city hospital.
Right.
The Times actually wrote a lot about this. It was really on the cusp of the pandemic. But once they were able to get their hands around it from a ICU standpoint, have enough PPE, have enough oxygen, the question is, from a public policy standpoint, do you shut everything down? Do you destroy an economy? Should you be managing it by telling people most vulnerable, you stay in, other people work, keep schools open because kids don't get this shit? It was really a horrendous thing, what they did in New York State as compared to Florida and Texas, where the death rates are, hospitalizations, caseloads were, not that much different, despite their economy doing well and ours not. Because
Sweden did that. They didn't shut down, right?
They did not. And
where are they at now? I really haven't kept in touch. Have they
you don't hear much
weathered
about
the pandemic?
I think they're on the other side of it. I mean, listen, one of the problems with this subject about the pandemic and figuring out is how politicized it is. It is politicized by the right by saying you don't need to wear masks, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. It's nothing, it's like the flu, which, by the way, it's not. And then it's politicized. Politicized by the right saying that, and it's politicized by the left that if we don't shut down, everybody's gonna die. And that was one of the problems here. I mean, literally, I remember listening to Dr. Osterholm, who's now he's an infectious disease expert.
Oh, the guy out of Houston, I think, right?
Yeah, and he's Biden's guy. His proposal was to do something like a $3 trillion bond deal, so everybody stays in for like 6 months. I mean, it was like the most insane thing I've ever heard of. I mean, I'm not saying he's stupid, but he has no concept of public policy.
Okay. All right. So why don't we switch gears to something that's near and dear to millennials' hearts, and that's crypto. You did an article on the Crypto Charlie, and you're talking about how the regulators and regulations could cause a crash in crypto. And I think Janet Yellen she's throwing out a lot of trial balloons. She must have a helium tank or something in her house now, but she's talking about taxing crypto at 80% and for capital gains.
She did not say that.
She did not say that?
Okay. That was a rumor. Thank God.
Okay. Okay. All right. So what could they do now that the horse is out of the barn? And a lot of banks this week have announced that they're going to allow the public to have crypto accounts.
Yeah.
And why did they let this Pandora box out of the bag to have a competition to their own currency?
Great question. Well, I mean, sometimes government is incredibly bad at getting in front of innovation, and they usually the innovation occurs and then the government comes in and does something stupid or tries to regulate it. What's interesting about Yellen and all these guys I listened to Gensler yesterday give
he's pro crypto, isn't he?
Yeah, he's theoretic. I don't know that, but he taught it allegedly at MIT. He taught blockchain technology.
Okay.
My point is, though, all these guys are talking a big talk about regulation. If it's Gensler wants to do gamification, crypto, Yellen wants to do crypto, they want to do this, that. If I'm doing a lot of reporting on this, they don't have undersecretaries and positions under them that's filled to do this stuff. Okay. I think people are forgetting this, that Biden is so behind, Biden administration. And I guess you can point your finger at Ron Klein, who's the White House chief of staff, the most powerful man in the country right now, has not appointed anybody to these positions. You're not going to have crypto regulation unless you point people to positions. And so remember, they're talking a good game now, but they're not. But because the Biden administration has been slow on the draw in terms of appointments, I don't see when they're going to start regulating crypto. You know, I mean, that's one of the things that, even though it's coming and they keep saying it's coming, who knows when it's
Okay.
going to come? They
You know
have
what
to
else is
literally.
what else is coming? We have a very informed audience here, and one of our attendees wants to know if you have heard any news that on June 16th, there's going to be an announcement of a digital US dollar, a CBDC. Have you heard of that?
So this is, you know, this is like the Treasury putting this out.
I'm not sure. I didn't know about it till I just read it. Any
I
follow-up
have not heard.
information?
I have not heard, but it would sound, just from a public policy standpoint, it would sound crazy.
Yeah. Well, I know China's doing it. They're going to have a digital yuan. So why is it crazy for the U.S.
Well,
to have Go ahead.
I'm not saying it's crazy that they should do it. I just say it's crazy that they're going to do it now. I think you have to look at what's going on in the Biden administration to try to like get your hands around this. Number one, they have nobody. They don't have enough warm bodies in senior positions to basically do much from a policy standpoint other than just let the train roll. Number two, they are so myopically focused on stimulus, on spending another $5 trillion, that all this other stuff just doesn't get done. And for Biden to like go out and do a digital coin when he needs to, actually print money with print dollars, and to create its own, to create some sort of an alternative to the dollar when they need to like expand the Fed's balance sheet right now, because who knows how this thing is going to work out. If we get rate hikes, does the Fed have to come in and suppress rates? I mean, I just think it would be like, it would be a left turn that would maybe even destabilize the markets. And I don't think they don't want to. There's one thing I know is about them is they don't want to destabilize anything. They just want to keep spending shit.
Yeah. So, I just had another comment about the SEC enforcement guy, Alex O, of how, he wasn't liberal enough. What's it called? Wokeism? Because she.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's probably Alexandra.
Right.
Okay. So because she represented big oil, that the progressive part of the Democratic Party, which what's it called? Wokeism, Charlie?
Yeah.
He's not liberal enough because of who she represented before this post, and she had to resign the post.
Yeah, I mean, listen, what you consider liberal and what I consider liberal is not liberal anymore. For example, I know a ton of people that.
Well, what you consider and I consider conservative isn't conservative anymore. So we have wokeism on the left. What's the terminology for someone like Lynn Cheney not being conservative enough for the majority of the Republicans in the House? Do we have a term for that?
Here's what I would say about this Cheney thing and this the conservative, the crack up in conservatives. If you look at Lynn Cheney from a policy standpoint, she would have voted 99% with Trump, right? Lower taxes, less government, less regulation.
Classical conservatism.
Yeah. But I think the crack up in the Republican Party over what is a conservative is less about policy and more about personality. I think it's the fact, is Donald Trump a proper representation of the party, particularly after what he did in inciting the riot at the Capitol. And I think that's where we have, and during the years, is he the guy that we want leading us when he's tweeting out crazy stuff? But from a policy standpoint, just so you know, all these people kind of agree on stuff. There's a broad agreement on ratcheting back immigration levels, lower taxes. You can go down the line. It's the personality. Should he be running it? That what's going on, the crack up on the Democratic Party that you saw with Alex Ho being forced out as SEC enforcement chief, which is an extremely important job in government. That's the guy. That's the person that's going to crack down on the Wall Street bad guys. I mean, this is a big job. Okay. The thing of her was political. the left believes, as liberal as she probably is in voting for higher taxes and more regulation, blah, 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 because she actually made money in the private sector and because she made money defending a corporation, in this case, big oil, when she was at Paul Weiss, she should be canceled. You can't have people like that in government. And the minute she had one little fault, right? She got dinged by a judge over something which looks pretty mundane, but it put her name in the news. They had to, she had to go, because they were going to seize on that to say, oh, look at this. She's not only this, but she represented Exxon and this case. By the way, the Exxon case that she represented Exxon against these villagers, if you read it, I mean, it doesn't, I'm not going out on a limb, and I wasn't there. Obviously, this has been going on for 20 years. The crux of the case is that Exxon wanted to kill Indonesian villagers and torture them because they had oil fields in Indonesia and that they allowed the government to do this. The evidence for that is pretty weak. You know what I'm saying? That what's his name? Rex Tillerson ordered people to be. I mean, it's just, think about how crazy that is. And that's why it's been thrown out of court, in and out. So just remember, the case itself is crazy.
All right. So, I want to wrap it with Charlie. I'm not on either side, but I'm very concerned that extremism in both parties is going to make it very difficult for the country to come together and get anything done, and a continuation of not just, trying to defeat people, but trying to hurt people. And
I'm with you on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you see anyone out there that can be a leader and be a compromiser and be a moderator? I so long for the days when Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill could tip a glass together, kind of like days gone by. Is it possible that someone might come out of this and be a uniter? I know that's what Biden ran on, but it doesn't look like it's happening.
Listen, this sort of nastiness that we see permeates all society right now. You got the cancel culture.
Yeah.
Listen, all you have to do is go on Twitter, and you do something that people don't like. You got 400 people like pulling up. 10 years ago, I said I'm going to give you an example. I said it was nominated for the Pulitzer, which I thought I was, by the Journal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Some asshole wrote a story that said, oh no, he wasn't. And all of us used to say nominated when the paper put you up, which was a big process and a big deal inside the Wall Street Journal, to distinguish it between a finalist. Okay. Listen to this. I once said I was nominated for the Pulitzer. I thought I was nominated. But then someone wrote, oh, Charlie Gasparino is a liar because he said he was nominated, but only finalists are nominated. This is how fucking crazy it is. Every time someone hates me, they will pull up that story and throw it in my face. And I get four people throwing it. Now, this is 4 out of 100,000 followers I have. But that's the type of society we live in. We live in a cancel culture. It almost made me say, I mean, I was like, I couldn't condemn Jeffrey Tubin for what he did because it was so innocent, even though it was stupid and disgusting. He didn't know what he was doing. But the guy was ridiculed for months on end. And I think this permeates all the way down through society. And I don't know, how do you change it? I mean, we need a cultural.
Well, how about a gap down in Twitter stock? And I don't know if you've noticed it, Charlie, but I've seen Twitter slow down. You don't get the same kind of action that you got maybe a year ago. Even the streams are slowing down, and the stock price got walloped. So, Twitter, all social media.
But why are people, what I don't understand is why people are so angry. And, it's so, I mean, it's like, I did a story the other day that said traders are speculating that Amazon might do a stock split and it could come as a, and by the way, they are speculating. If you predate my story, there's a ton of stories. We'll talk about this. It moved the stock tremendously, right?
Yeah.
Move the stock. I had no idea it was going to move the stock. I actually thought it was like a bullshit tweet. It was like hysterical. I was attacked by these fucking guys for hours. I was like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? What did I do? I
Yeah.
pointed out what traders are telling me. I did a story when I quoted the traders predicting it. And these guys, you're guilty of fraud. You told, one guy was trying to say that I did the story because it would help guys that were writing call options or something like that.
Yeah. Well, you know,
I
I have a theory, and you know, I've run a lot of rooms, trading rooms, and have moderated. And there are people out there that root for others to fail, and I think it's the same thing. And I believe that people do this to rationalize their own inadequacy and
I agree.
dissatisfaction
But
with
this is
their life.
permeating. But I think your bigger question is this permeates throughout society, politics, and we need a Tip O'Neill and a
that's what I'm saying.
Reagan. But you know, here's the thing: Biden is not doing that. He is actually stoking divisions more than I thought he would bring people together. He's not.
You know, I wasn't crazy about Trump, and I'm not crazy about Biden. So what does that make me?
Normal.
And maybe an expat.
They're as normal as they come.
Yeah. So anyway, Charlie, great talking to you again. And I know you're out and about. Have you taken your trip to Vegas and blown 10K?
I'm going. We're thinking. So I'm doing 2 vacations. I got to give a book speech in Fort Lauderdale in late May. So my wife and I will do a vacation down there in North Miami Beach. We're going to stay away from South Beach. We're going to eat some good food. We're going to hang out. We're going to hang out and by the pool. And then me and my friends are going to Miami, just guys. And, you know, later in June, it's going to be hot as hell. But, you know, when you drink, sometimes you don't feel the heat as much.
Well, I think the summer is a window, bro, to go out and enjoy after our captivity for a year.
Yes.
But I just have a feeling that things could bubble up again with COVID again in the fall with all the variants.
I don't, you know what? I don't.
You don't? You think it's over?
I don't know about over, but here's what I would tell you. I read Marty McCary. He's a doctor. He's at Johns Hopkins. You can follow him on Twitter. Very good stuff on how the Pfizer vaccine handles variants. I mean, listen, what you really want to do is just take, I mean, listen, you know, it doesn't have to be 100% coverage, but if you eliminate COVID for the deathly, for the people at most at risk,
like me,
you basically, well, I wouldn't even put you in that. I would just say, you know, you start to like make this the flu. And I think that's where we're going. And you know, then you just live your life. You know?
I toast you on that one. May it be over, because I miss you know, I'm a singer.
Dale, the flu isn't over. You know that. The flu still kills people. But what you want to do is make the pandemic be over. And I think that's where we're heading. And based on all the numbers I see, and I try to read both sides, you know.
Yeah.
And I think now we're going to cope with it better because it's not going to be a pandemic.
Well, get all your right-wing friends to get vaccinated, Charlie. That's your
last night I was speaking with a right-wing friend of mine. It's funny you mentioned that, where he said he's definitely not going to get vaccinated because it screws with your DNA. And I was like, dude, I said, what are you reading this? And he said he gets it from the QAnon boards. Yeah, I was like, we're in another era.
Yeah. You know, besides my genitals falling off, I had no side effects.
Well, I was going to say, in 10 years, you know what we were talking about yesterday? We're like, I said, you know, I'm so grateful I can eat in a restaurant. Even in 10 years, if I grow an arm out of my ear, I don't care.
Yeah. All right, buddy. All right. Have a great weekend, Charlie, and be talking to you soon, and appreciate your time.
Anytime. My pleasure.
All right.
We'll
everyone, Charlie Gasparino. That's a wrap for the week. Good hunting the rest of the day. And remember, don't just count your pips, count your blessings. Adios, everyone. And you can join the team on their reaction to the NFP in 9 minutes. See everyone. Adios.